Look at you.
You're very welcome back to the Daily Rundown with me, Fiona Fox, and I've been joined by the team behind Concrete Jungle. It's a new play at the Manchester Fringe Festival. The play follows a young journalist making an observational documentary about drug dealers. So I'm joined now by the writer Sarah O'Connell, actress Katie Federman and director Naomi Jones. Ladies, thank you so much for coming in. You're so good, and I know, you won't mind me saying, I know you're starving, so we really appreciate you coming. You've been working so hard, you've actually skipped your tea. We straight from rehearsals to come and chat to us today. Okay, so I'll start with you, Sarah.
Okay.
Just tell us, I've read your writing, I've read your article about your inspiration, but if you don't mind just kind of telling us what inspired you to write Concrete Jungle in the first place?
Indignation at my own industry, at observational documentary filmmaking. I really wanted to show the audience the rushes, what it's like behind the camera, why we edit material in certain ways, why we clip things, why we choose to show something on television and keep something back. So really I wanted to kind of get behind the camera with the audience and show them how we make a film.
And what was it like kind of making that jump from being a journo? Was it something you always wanted to do and then the topic came up, or was it the topic that made you become a playwright?
Not really, I just wrote it really quickly. I kind of wanted to, I suppose what I really decided was there was more truth in drama than there was in journalism, which was something that was really difficult for me to accept.
Right.
But I could include things that maybe my editors or executive producers tell me not to include, and so I kind of wanted to tell this particular story about the way that we make films, and you can't do that in journalism, and so that's really why I decided to do it.
Because I think a lot of people would be surprised that you feel that restricted, I think, as a journalist. Have they been, or that you didn't feel you had that freedom?
Well, I think one of the things that the play explores is the different agendas behind a film, and anyone who works in filmmaking knows that it's not as simple as all that. You'll have a hierarchy, an executive producer, a producer. There's lots of people with lots of different opinions, so you can't say it as you want it to be. Personally, that you have to include everybody's ideas, and so really I wanted to say it like I see it, the way I see it, and you can't do that when you make a film, not for a major news organisation anyway, because you've got that many people involved in the making of it.
Right, yeah.
So it's really all about me.
So it's all about you. That's what I was going to say. It's all about me.
It's all about me.
Hear me. Well, people will anyway. It's obviously it's an amazing topic. Naomi, what attracted you to the project?
Well, I think as a theatre director, I've worked a lot in new writing. So obviously, it being a new play is part of its attraction. But also, I've done quite a lot of sort of verbatim theatre, which is like theatre based on original testimony or original documents. And so, what appealed to me about the play was the sort of the notion of truth, actually, and how far something is truthful, and a lot of the kind of contested territory about verbatim theatre is about its truth claims, and if you interview someone and then edit their material, does that make it truthful? Is that real? Is that reality? Or but actually as soon as you edit anything, it becomes fictitious, doesn't it?
Right.
So I think and one of Natalia's lines is, I thought one of our best commodities was truth, and that we were about telling the true story. I think the play really questions or troubles that idea of how far something can be true and realistic and documentary if actually the material is skewed or edited or cut by whoever, and that the bias or the individual perceptions of the material will alter depending on who's in the editing room, and that's true in theatre. Whoever edits the verbatim material is responsible for the narrative, aren't they?
So how, because as I'm listening to both of you, you're both very much on the same page. Is that a happy coincidence? Certainly comes across that. But I mean, did you have a background before you met for this project, or no?
Well, we
we've
spent
known a long time.
Yeah, we spent a number of years sort of trying to get the play on, really,
right.
And giving it to people to read and hoping that they might get behind it. And
So sorry, how long ago did you actually write it then, Sarah?
I wrote it years ago.
Did you?
I left it in a drawer. I wrote it about 8 or 9 years ago. I
That was
threw
a
it in a
settle.
drawer. I didn't even think about it, to be honest. I wrote it really quickly.
Goodness.
Threw it away, not threw it away, just locked it in.
Yeah.
And then one of my friends found it and read it and said to me, "This is really good, you should do something with it." And it was only really then that I thought I'd written something that was worth seeing. I didn't really have that much confidence in it because I'm not a playwright, I'm a journalist.
Well, we are a playwright now.
Well, I know I am
Yeah,
now. But I mean, most of the play is based on dialogue I've heard. So when people say, "Oh, you're so creative," I feel like that's a bit of a con. Because I've done so many interviews with so many people, it's not difficult for me to remember what people have said to me. Journalists have to remember what people say to them. And so really the play is an amalgamation of what I've heard on the streets when I've interviewed drug dealers and gang members, and also what I've heard in edit suites from my producers and executive producers, and it's an amalgamation of that.
I think that's why the crossover between journalism and verbatim theatre was really clear, because lots of the material, lots of the dialogue feels very real, because it's sort of overheard, it's snatches of
been said to
dialogue,
me.
and absolutely, and that's
completely
why
truthful, as you said.
right.
It's going back to that.
That's part of the appeal.
I'll bob over to you, Katie. So you play the protagonist in Sarah's play. What's it like for you? It's Natalia, is it the
Natalia
yeah.
What was that
Southern's
like for you?
the character's name. It's a fantastic opportunity. I mean, I actually did a rehearsed reading of the play back in, I think it was 2012.
Wow, really?
We just literally sat around a table and got some actors on board, and everybody read it, and I had the opportunity to play Natalia then. And Sarah and I remained in contact, so I always hoped that it had a future because it spoke to me very strongly from the first reading as well. And so I'm delighted now to be involved in its first sort of full run.
And you're at rehearsal stage at the moment, aren't you? Because it's the 25th of July it actually starts here.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's in Manchester.
Yeah.
Sorry, what's the theatre again?
Whitefield Garrick Theatre.
And that's from the
Yeah,
25th.
yeah.
There's a very, very strong sort of female vibe about this project. I have to say. Now, again, is that kind of like a happy coincidence, or?
No,
It's fantastic.
I think that's very much written within the play. I think it really, it's about lots of things, but I think there's a strong sort
It
of
addresses sexism in the industry.
female.
It's a theme, is it?
And looks at the kind of problems or challenges of being a female journalist and working in a very male environment.
I think, and even for the three of you, though, as women, it must be quite empowering for you all working on this. And all the industries that you've all come from.
Yeah, they're all male dominated.
absolutely.
Very male dominated. Yeah,
But we're going to rule the world, girls.
which is nice to be.
I'm kind of sort of quoting Beyonce now. Is that where we're going?
Well, I've done that before. It's the first time for everything, isn't it?
No, it's amazing though. No, it's a really nice it's a really nice vibe. I'd say it's a really nice thing to be a part of. Sarah, I just wanted to ask you. I read the article that you wrote about the BBC. That was so interesting. We could do a whole other slot, I think, on it as well. But I know you obviously drew from that. Obviously with the play as well.
It's the same themes.
The same themes.
It covers the same, although the play's not about the BBC, the play's about broadcast journalism in general, but I made the point in the article, I think, that all the different news organisations are very similar in the way that they behave, I think, because I've worked for more than the BBC. I've worked for Channel 4, Al Jazeera, The Guardian, and I've not really seen anything different in any of the organisations. No, not really.
Do you think, I kind of thought that people might be surprised that this sort of still exists, this inequality and lack of kind of working class accents that's just one sort of semi-quote.
I think it might be slightly different in Manchester, in the newsrooms I've seen in Manchester. I do think there's a slight difference, but in the areas I've worked in journalism, I've worked for Panorama and for Newsnight and places like this, there's a high number of privately educated men in positions of power. I've had people make fun of my northern accent for years and years and years in the newsrooms. And yeah, it's a joke and yeah, it's funny, but actually a lot of the country speak like me or have an accent. So whilst I can laugh at a joke, after a bit it becomes a bit wearing, especially when you see in your own industry that people who speak like me aren't very often on Radio 4, for example. So I think it's it's fair game. for
Yeah,
me.
it's like it's kind of. I think reading it was kind of like a throwback to RP, and there was when I moved to England, everybody was sort of going, oh, it's a great time to move because there's so much more diversity accent wise, is what they meant, and especially they were really pushing kind of northern accents for what it felt. But what I suppose if you actually look, you're like, oh, there's the northern guy who's on the telly now, isn't that great because he's got a
It's
northern
noticed.
yeah.
Sorry.
I think it's like that with sort of women in positions of power, and of course it's on its way up, and of course it's changing, but it hasn't changed. I wouldn't say it's like
it's changing very slowly.
Yeah.
I would argue that it's
Yeah.
changing very, very
and
slowly.
if you think about the waves of the feminist movement, like actually that's moving pretty slowly, really.
Yeah.
And yes, it is getting better, but there's still
not quickly enough.
It's not quickly
Still not
enough. I
quality.
suppose it's like what we said. It's noticeable, isn't it? When you say the northern guy or
Right.
whatever, or but there's that woman, isn't there? Or she's got that job. You're like, yeah, that's one person. Or
Well, the
it's one
majority of
example.
your guests, I just asked your producer aside, like how many men-women ratio is it? Because obviously I'm sat outside watching two men be interviewed, and she said 65 to 70% men.
Yeah.
And because you can't get hold of the women to do it, and was it 2016?
I know,
And
yeah.
we're
It's
still
a problem.
doing
We've talked-
70%
it's a problem.
men. It's
It
a
is.
huge problem. It's a huge issue
Even
because
at
our
the
stories and
time.
our ideas and our perceptions, women's, don't get featured in the
Yeah.
same way. And I think it has a huge impact on news coverage, particularly when you're looking at rape cases and things like that. All this sort of thing, we don't get considered in the same way, which clearly is not a good idea.
Well, this is why it's absolutely amazing that you've done this play, Sarah. And I'm sorry that we don't have more time to talk about it. We have come to the end. So we'll just remind everybody the play is at the Whitefield. Is it Whitefield, Garrick?
It's Whitefield,
It's from
Garrick.
25th of July. So the very best of luck to you. Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
very
coming in
much.
because I know you're busy and I know you're starving. So go out and finish Sarah, Katie and Naomi, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Very
Our
best of luck.
pleasure.
thank you.
We're going to go for another break, and when I come back, Tom and Ian will be back with their Something to Say. Don't go away.